and this became an application of initiatory practices to
Hmm.
politics. When you become initiated into a secret society, you're initiated in a dangerous circumstance in darkness, like the Masonic initiations, blindfolded at the point of a sword. Eventually, at the third degree Masonic initiation, you are ceremonially slain and resurrected. You're given a new name in many secret societies. You take on a new name, a new identity. Only other members know this identity. You become a different person in that secret society. So there's this idea of creating new consciousness, new memories, new awareness. And this has been going on since the origin of the word mystery, the mysties of ancient Greece,
Hmm.
the initiations that took place there that were closed to outsiders. So you have now in the 20th century the militarization of these processes. How can we use them to win a war, to convert an enemy,
Hmm.
to demoralize an enemy, to make them think and believe like us?
So do you think that the enemy, in this case, if we take it to the logical conclusion, the enemy wouldn't be one nation against another so much as the elite and the rest of the population?
Well, that's sort of the lineaments of the quote unquote world war on terror, isn't it?
Hmm.
It's not a war on a country; it's a war on an idea,
Hmm.
or actually a war on a tactic. But that's another polemical discussion we can save for later. But let's just say there is such a thing as a terror that we can have a war against.
Right.
It represents a mindset, right? It represents a worldview. It represents a bunch of amorphous creatures out there in the darkness who wish to do us ill.
Hmm.
We cannot just say this country is terror. It's an idea.
Right.
So in order to fight the idea, we have to use ideas to fight ideas.
Yeah, and the war on terror extends not just to supposed terrorists, but to terrorist sympathizers, let's say. And so the citizens of the nation that's waging war can become the enemy of that nation, of that system, simply by not being blindly loyal to the system itself. You see that the razor's edge is getting
Of
narrower
course,
and narrower, isn't it?
of course it is. That goes back to the idea of reality itself. The word reality, which I write about a little bit in Sinister Forces. The word comes from an Indo-European root, real, which in many languages, many Romance languages, in Spanish, for example, the word real can be the word for reality as we understand it,
Hmm.
but also the word for royal.
Right.
So that reality is whatever the king says it is.
Hmm.
Like you mentioned the term before, consensus reality. I mean, we agree that this is reality, and whatever is outside the kingdom is not real.
Hmm. Right.
So whatever outside of our worldview is, here there be monsters.
Yeah, and the way that when you're talking about creating of a new consensus, the way that a current consensus is created, as you point out, is by agreement, is by getting people to agree. And so the more people that you get to agree, the stronger that consensus becomes, right? And so
Right.
if we're talking about small groups of elite, let's say, whose bid is for power, for dominance and total control, then presumably their objective is to create a consensus in which they are, as you say, the royalty, so that the more believers they can get in their consensus, their falsely created reality, the more power is coming to them. It's almost like a deity with worshippers, wouldn't you say?
Certainly. Yeah, I agree completely. And the idea is to convince people without using force, if possible, because you want to win a war with as few casualties as possible. You want to gain as much of the natural resources of your enemy as possible. You don't want to necessarily force people to agree with you because you know that's going to be a problem later on.
Mm.
If you can convince them, and if we can all agree that this is reality, then the war is already won.
And so I mean, if we stay with this idea of an elite who are attempting to shape reality in order to maximize their amount of power and control, it's all about consent, isn't it? It's getting people to give up their freedom, give up their attention, give up their energy to that consensus so that they actually become components with it. And this is very similar to the old sort of primitive or the traditional idea of almost like King Kong, the great primal deity on the island that you have to offer up a virgin to at regular intervals to keep it placated. So you think that the idea of blood sacrifice, I mean, is this the ultimate kind of the way that a population gives its consent, is when it agrees to go to war for its rulers and actually offers up its blood?
Certainly. I mean, the people who do this in the United States, for instance, and I'm going to probably be attracting a lot of irritated listeners, but when our troops go to war, they're going to war for an idea. They're going to war for an idea which may not be completely clearly formulated, but they know they're dying for the flag, for the country, for security, for their families. We've presented this package. So no matter what war we go into, no matter how ill-conceived or ill-formulated, the idea is there. The idea is uppermost. We sell the idea first. We have to sell the idea first. Especially now, we have an all-volunteer army. During Vietnam, you didn't. During Vietnam, you drafted people left and right. Hundreds of thousands of young men drafted into the army to fight a war that was very unpopular. And what the result of that was is we had many troops who were just wanted to get out of that war as quickly as possible. You know, they were there, they didn't want to be there, they wanted to get out. We had drug addiction rampant in the army in those days. We had all kinds of issues and situations there because the people were not convinced of the rightness of this conflict. They didn't buy in. So it became extremely divisive in the United States. Iraq, we had a Reichstag fire. You know, we had 9/11. So that was our Reichstag fire. That's what Hitler needed to gain power in Germany. He blamed the burning of the Reichstag on communist plotters and was able to take total control. In our time, it was the 9/11 towers going down. There's a lot of controversy over that, of course. A lot of people say that we did it ourselves. Others say we knew about it in advance. It doesn't matter in the final analysis. The towers went down, and we went to war. That was the equation.
Right.
No matter what the rationale was, no matter what the real reason was, if there was a conspiracy or not, people are too concerned about that aspect without seeing what really happened, cause and effect.
Right.
The towers going down. I was living overseas at the time. I was in Malaysia. I was in Kuala Lumpur, where the plotting had taken place, quite frankly, before 9/11, a few blocks away from where it was taking place, unbeknownst to me, of course. So I'm watching on television, the towers go down, and my first reaction is, I know what's going to happen. This is what Bush needed. This was our Reichstag fire. Now we have the excuse to go nuts in the Middle East, and of course we did. It was perception. It was we created a reality. We used an event of iconic significance, and we painted it immediately in the colors we wanted it to be seen in. And we owned it. The Bush administration owned it, quite frankly. They owned it. And there was no going away from it once he owned it. You know, it was it. That was our reality then. And you had people signing up to go and fight in Afghanistan and Iraq.
So you think that was a case of hypnotic programming on a mass scale, you might even say? It's about creating a new consensus. We've got pre-9/11, we've got post-9/11. The whole Western world has been radically reconfigured as a result of that event. But it may go even deeper. From what you're saying is that actually a whole new reality was created through that event. And it reminded me of the old trick of the Zen masters, that when they would want to teach an apprentice something, they would whack them on the head with a stick first of all, and to open them up. And there's that moment of stunned shock in which they're open to a new program. So do you think that 9/11 could be seen in that way, as a form of theatre, if you like, to reprogram a population and even a planet to buy into a whole new consensus reality?
Well, I believe it was used that way. Again, as I say, the whole controversy over conspiracy, no conspiracy is, I think, beyond the scope of what we're talking about, but I think it was used that way, and that's the important thing. The value of it was seen. The value of it was recognized immediately as giving the administration carte blanche, and they could create a new reality. I kept hearing people say constantly, the whole world changed after 9/11. The whole world changed.
Right.
The implication being reality has changed. Now, technically speaking, the world did not change on 9/11. Europe has undergone so many terrorist attacks since the end of World War II. It's not funny. There were bombings in Munich, bombings in Rome, Bologna train station, Northern Ireland, on and on and on. I mean, there's been terrorist attacks constantly. You know, so it finally came to the United States. And when it came to the United States, suddenly the world changes. I mean, that's a very American-centric perspective, you know.
Hmm.
because it happened to us. Now the world changed. If it happened in Spain or Italy or Germany or the UK, well, that's just those people. That's their reality, nothing to do with us. But when it
Right.
happened to us, now all reality has changed. Now the whole world has changed, and I find that to be very, very absurd. Basically, it's an absurdist point of view.
Hmm. But it happened in such a way that the whole world could be impacted with it, rather like the JFK assassination. I mean, it was captured in such a visceral way that the imagery alone, of course, the imagery is a universal language. It speaks to the unconscious mind as well as the conscious mind. And so, even though all over the world it was still just a local event happening somewhere else, but the power of the image, I think, allowed it to reach people at a much deeper level than it could possibly have done if it had been an equally grand event but less visually shocking.